Hey everyone and welcome to another episode. I'm Ombarus and this week we're going to be talking about one of those painfully hard things to design. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I have a video about the 3 level of design philosophy that I have and I suggest you check it out. But basically what it comes down to is that there's like 3 level of difficulty when it comes to designing architecture for your game. And the first level is like making an abstract layer for the disk access on your game. That's pretty easy and it's straightforward and it usually works really well. And then there's something a little bit more difficult to design, but that's kind of worth it in the end. Like maybe having a layer of physics engine that's separate from the rest of your game. That's complicated but feasible. And then there's these things that you just can't seem to separate from the rest of your game, like tutorial or online or stuff like that, that will just have their fat little finger inside everything. And this week, that's what I've been working on. I wanted to make a system that can do everything. And yeah, that's not easy. So let me tell you a little bit more about my idea. I hope I'm not going to be rambling too much because it's kind of an abstract concept, but stay with me a little bit. See, my game doesn't have any unlockables, it doesn't have stuff you can buy between runs, there's no sense of evolution like most modern game. It's a really good old roguelike in the purest sense of the form, where you play the game only to be able to succeed at the end. That said, it still feels like there's something missing compared to NetHack or Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup. And if you look at those games, there's something called conducts in NetHack, and there's the rune system in Dungeon Crawl Stone Soup that gives you an incentive to try again, but with some challenges. The problem is that runes are not something that I feel would fit in a science fiction theme. And, well, a spaceship doesn't really have conducts, does it? So I started thinking, what kind of achievement can I add in my game? And I figured, what about the crew of the spaceship? You know, the classic tropes in Star Trek where there's always a red shirt dying somewhere or a Spock getting irradiated and thrown in the planet or something. What if my game had these kind of achievement where you can save your crew and bring them back home? But if you fail, well, it doesn't have much impact, but, you know, that's one less person that will come back to hurt when you succeed in the game, and yeah, that should count for something, right? So I figured maybe my achievements will be to save the crew of the ship one at a time during random events. But the problem with that is that each of those events need to have different challenges and be unique, which means that it could be anything from like killing a specific ship to maybe going on a specific planet or meeting some specific alien or maybe, you know, having a specific discussion or a specific item in your inventory. I mean, it can be anything. The idea is that it should be different every time. But how do you structure your code when you can have everything? Thankfully, I recognized the signs and I realized that this will only end in ugly code. And what do you do when you know your code is going to be ugly? Well, you try to contain it. You try to prevent it from spreading everywhere in your code base. The behavior entity component system I'm using right now for my game is actually just perfect for isolating these kind of ugly piece of code, because I just created a separate node for each of my challenges or rooms or whatever you want to call them, and inside I just hook up to all the events I already have in my game to trigger the start of the challenge, the end of the challenge, and every step of the way. And I already have all the methods and systems I need to spawn new entities or to create unique tags inside of each entities to have special attributes or special behavior or something like that for my challenge. And so this went pretty well. Yes, the code is pretty ugly inside a single rune because it needs to take into account a lot of data, a lot of stuff. It needs to randomize encounters. It's badly organized and it evolves slowly through design and all of this. But in the end, it looks pretty all right. The biggest issue I really had was creating more complex dialogues because I want these challenges to be kind of like the story of each of the crew member. I needed some kind of conversation inside the game to explain each of the challenge. And really, from the beginning, I had decided that my game wouldn't have much dialogue. So I didn't spend much time designing a complex dialogue conversation system. It's a bit of a problem right now because I want to be able to stack multiple dialogues, and potentially there could be multiple events triggering different runes all at the same time. So I could end up with like 4 challenges wanting to show dialogues all at the same time. And I didn't really have a good system of doing that. So I spent some time trying to think about what am I going to do with this. And I figured that the best way to do it would be to implement some kind of locking mechanism, a little bit like mutexes for threading. I was starting to think about how to do this when I realized I already have a system like that for blocking the gameplay while animations are playing. I have an event called onWait for animation, and that basically stops the gameplay until the animation has finished playing, so that I can chain multiple animation, like when you're shooting a ship and then the ship explodes and then it drops all its items. I already have something like that, and I thought maybe I can reuse that for my dialogues. When a rune decides that it has a bunch of dialogues it wants to display, it just locks the game for the duration of the dialogues, and if any other runes or tutorial want to display some dialogue, then it has to wait until the animation is completed. Now, it's really hackish, and I kind of expected to have a lot of issues, but right now it's actually working pretty well. And I figured, well, maybe in the future when I get some issues with this, I can figure out a better system for it, but right now, that'll do the trick. Just like I mentioned in one of my previous videos about threading and yields, the best way to chain multiple dialogues now is just have the dialogue, then yield until the dialogue is popped with the onPop dialogue event. Or if before starting the event, there's already something else going on, then I just wait on the animation event finished. And well, that's just magical. That just works really well. And the last step of this whole new system I'm implementing was to add a way for the player to see all of his achievements and the crew and, what states they're in, and maybe a hint about what is the next step for them to unlock this achievement. And I have to admit, I struggled a lot with the design. I wasn't sure if I wanted something more personal with maybe like a crew picture or something like that to make it feel like it's a really important part of the ship, or maybe something less formal, more cold, like kind of like the rest of the design of the game where there's only menus and text and not many like image or something like that. Always start with reference, they say. So the first thing I did was start looking up other reference of how people make lists or challenges lists or ship lists in different games, especially concentrating on older games because I want my game to feel like this 80s style DOS game or something like that. I started drawing some stuff on paper. I came up with a couple of different ideas. Still wasn't quite sure what I wanted to go with, so I booted up Godot, started a couple of new scenes, and I started prototyping the dialogues. And I came up with about 3 dialogues that I thought might be interesting, and in the end I went with the third one. I like it because right now it has all the information you need, and it even has this little field that I call the captain's log, which can show a bunch of different information, but also can be used for a more personal message to give each crew member a little bit more personality. And so that's pretty much it for this week. I added 3 challenges and I'm pretty happy with them. It's very interesting and they work pretty well. And they can give a big bonus to your score if you decide to do them. But they're all optional. But why wouldn't you want to save your crew, right? You're a good captain. Of course, as everything around the world is grinding to a halt because of the pandemic, it's become very hard for me to release my game right now. So I wanted to do an alpha version somewhere around this month. But I'm not sure I'm going to be able to do that because I'm still missing some stuff, waiting on some people. And anyway, I don't think it's a good time right now to try to release a game. I doubt I would get much downloads. So maybe actually I'm going to keep working on some new features and package that into my very first update, or even make this update the very first alpha version I'm going to do maybe somewhere this summer or something. I'm not quite sure yet. But anyway, stay tuned next week for more programming challenges and see you guys in my next episode. Bye!